The sun was setting low over the desert, painting the sky with shades of red and gold. The land stretched wide, empty and quiet, broken only by the sound of the cowboy's horse walking slowly through the dust. He had been riding for days, carrying nothing but his saddlebag, a water flask, and the thoughts of a lonely man with no place he truly called home. His life had been about moving from town to town, taking small jobs, staying until trouble grew too big, and then leaving again. He did not expect this journey to change him. He thought it was just another trail, another evening under the wide sky. But life had something different waiting for him. As he came close to a dried-up riverbed, he noticed movement. At first he thought it was an animal, maybe a coyote looking for water, but then he saw her, a young woman, standing straight even though her body showed signs of exhaustion. Her long dark hair moved with the wind, her eyes sharp but filled with fear and something deeper, desperation. She was not dressed like the settlers he had seen. Her clothes and the beads she wore told him she was from one of the Apache tribes. The cowboy slowed his horse and watched her carefully. She did not run away. Instead, she stepped forward. Her voice, though tired, carried strength. "Save my tribe," she said, "and I'll give you strong offspring." The cowboy froze. He had heard many strange requests in his wandering life, but none as direct as this. He studied her face. She was serious. Her words came not as a trick, not as a game, but as a plea. For a moment he did not know what to answer. He opened his mouth, closed it, and then asked, "Why come to me? I'm just a cowboy riding through the desert." Her eyes did not leave his. "Because you carry no flag. You are not from the soldiers, and you are not from the towns that hate us. You are a man who walks alone. A man like that can choose his side." He dismounted slowly, keeping his hands open to show he meant no harm. The desert wind blew between them, filling the silence. He asked her again to explain. The woman took a deep breath, her voice trembling now. "My people are hungry. The land is dry. Enemies surround us. If no one helps us, the children will die. The old will fade, and soon nothing will remain of us. I saw you passing, and I prayed for a sign. You are the sign." Her words struck him harder than he wanted to admit. He looked past her, into the direction where her tribe must have been. He thought of the thin children she spoke of, their stomachs empty, their mothers unable to feed them. He thought of his own childhood, alone without a father, wandering from place to place. He knew the sting of hunger and the pain of being without a home, but still he hesitated. "If I help you," he said, "I'll make enemies. Settlers don't forgive men who stand with the tribes. Soldiers don't forgive either. Why risk my neck for people who don't even know me?" Her answer was simple, yet heavy with truth. "Because a man with no people is already half dead. Help us and you will have a people. You will not die forgotten in the desert. You will be remembered." The cowboy looked at her again, and he saw that she was not bargaining with him like a traitor. She was speaking from a place of fear and hope. Her promise of strong offspring was not about herself alone. It was about the future of her people, about survival, about giving life another chance. She was offering him a place in something bigger than himself. He thought about leaving. He could get on his horse, ride away, and pretend this never happened. That would be the easy way. But as he turned his head, he caught the sound of a child's cry in the distance. Faint, carried by the wind, his chest tightened. He had always tried to live without ties, without bonds, but in that moment, he realized that freedom without purpose was just another kind of prison. "Take me to your tribe," he finally said. Relief washed over her face. She nodded quickly, motioning him to follow. They walked together under the fading light. The cowboy guided his horse while she led the way through the narrow paths of the desert. After an hour, they reached a small camp hidden between rocky hills. What he saw there changed his heart more than her words ever could. Children sat near a weak fire, their faces thin, their eyes searching for hope. Old men and women sat in silence, too weak to speak. A few warriors stood guard, their eyes sharp but their shoulders heavy with worry. The cowboy felt dozens of eyes turned toward him. They looked at him not with trust but with doubt. He was an outsider, and outsiders had brought them pain before. The young woman raised her hand, signaling them to lower their fear. She told them who he was, how she found him, and what she had asked of him. The elders gathered, their faces lined with years of wisdom and hardship. One of them, an old man with a voice like gravel, asked the cowboy directly, "Why would a stranger help us? What do you want in return?" The cowboy paused, then looked at the woman and finally at the children. "I don't want land. I don't want gold. I don't want to own anyone. I just don't want to see your children starve while I ride away with a full stomach. If I can help, I will." The camp grew quiet. The elders whispered among themselves. The old man finally nodded. "Words are easy. Show us your heart through your actions," the cowboy agreed. He knew trust was not given, it was earned. That night he sat by the fire eating only a little of what was offered to him, leaving the rest for the children. He listened to the tribe's stories, stories of loss, stories of bravery, and stories of a land that had once been rich but was now dry. The woman sat near him, her eyes no longer filled with desperation but with a cautious hope. As the stars filled the sky, the cowboy lay awake, thinking of the promise he had stepped into. He had come to this place as a wanderer with no ties. Now with every word he heard, with every face he saw, he felt a thread pulling him into something greater. He did not know if he was strong enough or wise enough to save them. But he knew he could not walk away. The desert night was cold, but for the first time in many years he felt warmth in his chest. It was not the fire. It was the feeling of belonging, even if only for a moment. And so the journey began. The next morning, the cowboy woke up to the sound of soft voices around the fire. The sun had not yet risen fully, but the tribe was already moving. Women prepared what little food they had. Children rubbed their eyes and clung to their mothers, and the warriors sharpened their spears and checked their bows. The cowboy sat up slowly, feeling the stiffness in his back from sleeping on the hard ground. He looked around and saw the Apache woman who had brought him here. She was speaking with an older man, most likely one of the elders. Their faces were serious, and from time to time their eyes turned toward him. He knew they were speaking about whether to trust him or not. He walked toward the fire where the old man from the night before sat. The elder raised his eyes and gestured for him to sit. A wooden bowl with a little broth was placed in front of him. It was thin, more water than food. But the cowboy understood that this was not because they did not want to feed him. It was because there was so little to share. He sipped quietly and listened. The elder finally spoke. "You are a stranger. We have been betrayed by strangers before. They came with promises, and then they took our land, our horses, and our lives. Why should we believe that you are different?" The cowboy put down the bowl and thought carefully. He knew words alone would not win their trust. "I can't change the past," he said slowly, "but I can stand with you now. I have no army, no land, and no family waiting for me anywhere. I have nothing to lose, and maybe that makes me the right man to help you." The elder studied him. The young woman spoke then, her voice strong and steady. "He could have left when I asked for help. He could have ridden away and forgotten us. But he came here. That means something." Some of the younger warriors shook their heads. One of them, tall and proud, stepped forward. "If you truly want to help, then prove it. Show us that your hands and heart are not empty." His tone was sharp, but the cowboy did not feel anger. He understood. This was not about pride, it was about survival. The cowboy stood. "Then let me try. Tell me what you need most." The elder's eyes turned toward the horizon. "Water," he said simply. "Our wells are dry. Our children cry in the night for thirst. If you know the land, help us find what we cannot." The cowboy nodded. He had ridden across deserts before, and he had learned a few tricks. He remembered how certain plants grew only near hidden streams, how the ground sometimes told stories if you looked closely. He asked for 2 men to come with him, and though they hesitated, 2 younger braves agreed. The Apache woman insisted on coming too. The cowboy did not argue. They left the camp together, moving across the rocky land. The sun grew hot quickly, beating down on their heads, but they did not stop. The cowboy searched the ground, looking for signs. He saw animal tracks, fresh and clustered, leading in one direction. He pointed. "Animals do not walk long without water. If we follow them, we may find a source." Hours passed, and the heat grew heavier. The 2 braves began to doubt, whispering in their language. But the woman pushed forward, keeping her eyes on the cowboy. Finally, they reached a patch of green shrubs, unusual in the middle of dry sand and stone. The cowboy knelt and brushed the ground with his hand. The soil was damp beneath the surface. "Here," he said. The braves dropped to their knees, feeling the earth. Their eyes widened. One of them shouted, and soon they were digging with their knives and hands. After some time, water seeped up slowly from the ground. It was not much at first, but it was enough to fill their flasks. The Apache woman smiled for the first time since he had met her. When they returned to camp with water, the tribe gathered around them. Children rushed to drink. Mothers gave thanks, and the elders looked at the cowboy with new eyes. Trust was still far away, but respect had begun. That evening, the fire burned brighter and the mood was lighter. The cowboy sat among them, and for the first time, some of the men spoke to him not with suspicion but with curiosity. They asked where he came from, what he had seen, and why he chose a life alone. He answered honestly. He told them about the wars he had seen, the towns where greed ruled, and the men who lived only for themselves. "I never stayed anywhere long," he said, "because I never felt I belonged. Maybe that is changing now." The young warrior who had doubted him before still looked at him with narrowed eyes, but he did not speak against him anymore. The elder simply nodded as though he had seen enough for the moment. Later that night, when most of the tribe had gone to sleep, the cowboy sat outside the circle of firelight, looking at the stars. The Apache woman came and sat beside him. She was quiet for a while, then she spoke softly. "Today you gave my people something they had not felt in many months. Hope. Do you know how powerful that is?" The cowboy shook his head. "I only found a bit of water." She smiled faintly. "Water keeps the body alive. Hope keeps the soul alive. Without one, the other cannot last." Her words stayed with him long after she left his side. He realized then that helping them was no longer about proving himself or finding a purpose. It was about life itself, the lives of children who deserved a chance, the lives of elders who carried history, the lives of a people who refused to vanish quietly. But he also knew danger was coming. Settlers would not be happy to see the Apache grow stronger again. Soldiers would not be happy to hear of a cowboy standing with them. Trouble would come sooner or later. He had chosen his side, but he did not yet know what price he would pay for that choice. The night stretched on, and sleep did not come easily. He thought of his old life, drifting from town to town, never cared for, never trusted. Here in a camp that still doubted him, he felt more alive than he had in years. It was strange, and it frightened him. By the time the first light of dawn touched the horizon, he had made a quiet promise to himself. If this tribe needed him, he would not run. If enemies came, he would stand with them. His horse could carry him away, but his heart was already tied to this land, to these people, and to the woman whose eyes had begged him not just for help, but for belief. The cowboy breathed deeply, feeling the cool air of morning. For the first time in his life, he did not feel like a wanderer with no place to belong. He felt like a man who had stepped onto a road that mattered, and though he knew it would not be easy, he was ready to walk it. The days passed slowly, but each day the bond between the cowboy and the tribe grew stronger. At first, the people still watched him with careful eyes, but after he helped them find water, the suspicion softened. The children were the first to trust him. They followed him around the camp, laughing as they tried to imitate his walk, or staring wide-eyed when he showed them how to whistle through a blade of grass. For the cowboy, who had lived so long without a family, this simple attention filled a quiet place inside him he had never known was empty. The Apache woman often stayed near him. She translated when he spoke with the elders, explained the tribe's ways, and helped him understand their traditions. She told him the stories her people carried, stories of the land and the sky, of battles fought and peace once known. The cowboy listened with respect. He had spent his life hearing only tales of money, guns, and greed. These stories were different. They were about survival, unity, and the spirit of a people. One afternoon, the cowboy decided to share what he knew. The braves of the tribe were skilled hunters, but many of their tools were worn and their bows were weak from lack of fresh wood. He gathered them around and showed them how to repair broken rifle stocks with leather straps, how to sharpen dull knives with stone until they shone again, and even how to set small traps for rabbits and quail. At first, they were cautious, not wanting to admit that an outsider could teach them anything. But when his traps caught food that very evening, the young men began to look at him differently. He also showed them how to read tracks the way he had learned on cattle drives. "See here," he explained, kneeling beside a faint print in the dirt. "This is fresh. The edges are sharp, not rounded by wind. The animal passed by less than an hour ago." The warriors leaned closer, their eyes wide. They were good hunters, but his eyes carried the experience of many lonely miles across empty lands. By mixing their skills with his, they became stronger together. Still, not everyone trusted him. The tall young warrior who had spoken against him earlier kept his distance. His name was Kiona, and he had lost his brother in a raid by settlers only months ago. To him, every outsider was a reminder of pain. He watched the cowboy with sharp eyes, waiting for a mistake. The cowboy understood and did not blame him. Trust needed time, and sometimes it needed proof greater than words. The test came sooner than anyone expected. One evening, as the sun began to set behind the hills, a scout returned to camp, breathing hard. He carried bad news. A group of armed men had been seen not far away. They were settlers, angry and restless, and they had been speaking of driving the Apache away for good. Fear spread quietly through the camp. The women gathered their children and the warriors spoke in low voices. The elder called for the cowboy. "You have said you will stand with us. Now we will see if your words are true." The cowboy felt the weight of every eye on him. He nodded slowly. "Tell me what you know of these men." "They are many," the scout said. "More guns than we have. They come at night when they think we sleep." The cowboy thought quickly. He had seen such men before. Hungry for land, greedy for power, believing the tribe was weak. If the Apache tried to fight them head-on, they would lose. But there were other ways. That night, the cowboy worked with the warriors to prepare. He showed them how to set false fires on the edges of the camp, making it look as if the people slept in places that were empty. He led them to build barriers with rocks and logs in the narrow passes leading to the camp, places where attackers would be slowed. He even taught them to stretch thin ropes between trees at ankle height, ropes that would trip men running in the dark. The Apache listened carefully, working quietly in the moonlight. When the raiders came, just as the scout had warned, they found not a sleeping camp, but a trap. Their boots stumbled on the hidden ropes, their horses spooked at the sudden noise of rocks tumbling down. Arrows flew from the shadows, not to kill but to scatter and confuse. The cowboy fired his rifle only once into the air, a warning shot that echoed loudly through the canyon. The raiders, frightened and unprepared, fled into the night, shouting curses but carrying no victory. The tribe had won without losing a single life. When the camp gathered again after the danger passed, the people looked at the cowboy with new eyes. He had stood with them, not as an outsider, but as one of their own. Even Kiona, the doubtful warrior, bowed his head slightly in respect. It was not friendship yet, but it was the beginning of something close. The children danced around the fire, singing songs of bravery. The elders blessed the night as one where their people had been protected. The Apache woman stood beside the cowboy, her eyes shining with pride. "You did more than save us," she whispered. "You gave us courage again." The cowboy shook his head. "It was your people who fought. I only showed a way." But inside he felt something he had not felt in years. Purpose. He was no longer a man wandering without reason. He had become part of something greater, and that gave his heart strength. The days that followed were filled with hard work. The cowboy stayed close to the warriors, helping them prepare for the dangers that might return. He taught them how to mend fences for their horses, how to spot signs of an ambush, and how to stay quiet while moving through rocky land. In return, the tribe taught him their ways. They showed him how to listen to the wind, how to read the stars, and how to move with the silence of the desert. At night, around the fire, he listened to their songs. They were songs of survival and memory, of ancestors who had walked the same land. The cowboy, who had never known songs of his own people, felt a strange comfort in theirs. But deep inside, he knew this peace was fragile. Settlers would not give up easily. Soldiers would come one day. Trouble was a shadow that never stayed far. Still, he decided he would not leave. Whatever storm came, he would face it here. And as he looked at the Apache woman across the fire, her face lit softly by the flames, he realized something more. This was no longer only about keeping his promise to her. This was about belonging, about building a future where once there had been only emptiness. The cowboy, once a man with no place to call home, had found himself standing in the heart of a people who needed him. And in their need, he discovered his own reason to live. The sun rose red over the desert, casting long shadows across the rocky land. The cowboy woke to the sound of nervous voices moving through the camp. He stepped outside and saw the Apache people gathering. Scouts had returned at dawn, their faces grave. The news was worse than before. This time it was not a handful of raiders. A larger force of armed men was preparing to strike, and they would not be frightened off easily. They carried rifles, horses, and the determination to wipe out the tribe once and for all. The cowboy stood still, listening carefully as the elders spoke with the scouts. Fear spread quietly through the camp. Mothers clutched their children. Old men looked at the sky with weary eyes. The young warriors sharpened their blades and checked their bows, but even they knew that this fight would be harder than any before. The cowboy felt the weight of their fear pressing on him. He had promised to stand with them, and now that promise would be tested more than ever. He stepped forward. "How many men are coming?" he asked. The scout answered, "More than 30, maybe 40. They ride together and they will be here before sunset." The cowboy's jaw tightened. He had faced gunfights before, but never against so many at once. The tribe was brave, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. If they tried to fight in the open, they would surely lose. He turned to the elders and spoke firmly. "We cannot face them in the open. We must fight with the land on our side. This desert can be our shield if we use it wisely." The Apache woman stood beside him, her eyes steady. "Tell us what must be done," she said. The cowboy nodded and began to give instructions. He sent scouts to the high cliffs to watch the enemy's movements. He told the women and children to be hidden in the safest caves nearby, places where no bullet could reach. He worked with the warriors to set traps again, but this time stronger and smarter. Large rocks were loosened on the slopes above the narrow paths, ready to be pushed down at the right moment. Holes were dug and covered with brush, sharp stakes hidden inside. Fires were prepared at the edges of the camp, not for warmth, but to create smoke screens when the time came. The tribe worked quickly, their fear turning into determination. Even the children helped carry stones and branches. The cowboy moved among them, guiding, teaching, and encouraging. For the first time, he did not feel like a stranger. He felt like a leader, though he had never asked for the role. By afternoon, the camp was ready. The warriors painted their faces with colors of war, symbols of courage and unity. The cowboy checked his rifle and revolver, loading each bullet with care. He had only so many shots, and each one would have to count. He looked toward the horizon where a cloud of dust was rising. The raiders were coming fast. As the enemy drew near, the cowboy felt his heart beat harder. He thought of his old life, of towns he had left behind, of men he had fought for money or pride. This fight was different. This time he was not fighting for himself. He was fighting for people who had given him trust, for children who deserved a future, for a woman whose desperate plea had changed his life. The enemy reached the narrow pass just before sunset. Their voices were loud, their laughter cruel. They believed victory was already theirs. But the desert had other plans. The moment they entered the pass, the signal was given. Large rocks thundered down from the cliffs, scattering horses and throwing men to the ground. The raiders shouted in confusion, their guns firing wildly, but the dust and noise blinded them. Then the warriors struck. From the shadows, arrows flew fast and true. Warriors moved silently among the rocks, striking quickly and vanishing again. The cowboy fired his rifle from a hidden ridge, each shot finding its mark. The raiders tried to push forward, but the ground betrayed them. Horses stumbled into pits, men tripped on hidden ropes. Every step closer to the camp cost them dearly. The cowboy fought with steady hands, his mind clear despite the chaos. At one point, he saw a raider aiming toward a group of women carrying water to the fighters. Without thinking, he rushed down, tackling the man before he could fire. The struggle was rough, but the cowboy's strength and determination carried him through. When he rose again, the women were safe and the Apache warriors had driven the raiders further back. The battle raged until the sky turned black and the stars appeared. Smoke rose from the fires, covering the land with shadows. The raiders, beaten and broken, finally began to retreat. Their leader shouted curses, promising to return, but his men no longer had the will to fight. They fled into the night, leaving behind their wounded and their pride. Silence fell slowly over the land. The tribe gathered, their faces lit by the dying flames. They had lost some blood, but they had not lost their spirit. The camp still stood, and the children still breathed. It was a victory, though it came with pain and exhaustion. The cowboy stood apart for a moment, breathing hard, his hands shaking slightly from the fight. He had faced death many times in his life, but never had it felt so heavy, so meaningful. The Apache woman approached him quietly. She placed her hand gently on his arm and looked into his eyes. "You kept your word," she said softly. "You stood with us when others would have turned away." He looked at her and nodded, too tired to speak. For the first time in many years, he felt something close to pride, not for himself, but for what they had done together. That night, the tribe held a small ceremony. The elders spoke prayers of thanks to the spirits of the land. The warriors sang songs of bravery. Children laughed again, chasing each other in the firelight, their fear forgotten for a little while. The cowboy sat among them, listening, watching, and feeling more at peace than he had ever known. Yet deep inside, he knew this was not the end. The raiders might come again, stronger and angrier. Soldiers might arrive one day, carrying orders to destroy what remained of the tribe. The road ahead was still full of shadows. But he also knew something else. He would not walk away. His place was here now. His heart had chosen. As the fire burned low and the stars stretched endlessly above, the cowboy thought of the path that had brought him here. A lonely man with no ties had become the protector of a people. A desperate plea from a woman had given him purpose, and though the future was uncertain, he no longer feared it. For the first time in his wandering life, he belonged. The night after the battle was long and heavy. Smoke still hung in the air, and the camp carried the smell of dust and fire. The cowboy did not sleep much. He sat near the edge of the camp, watching the stars as his thoughts wandered. The tribe had survived, but he knew their troubles were far from over. The men who had fled would tell others. More enemies could return at any time. Yet in the middle of that uncertainty, he also felt something new. For the first time in many years, he was not thinking only of himself. His life had become tied to the lives of others, and that gave his heart a kind of peace. By morning, the camp stirred slowly. Women carried water, children played carefully among the ashes, and the warriors checked the land for signs of danger. The elders gathered to speak, their voices calm but serious. The cowboy walked toward them, unsure if he would be welcomed in their circle. To his surprise, the elder who had once questioned him raised a hand and gestured for him to sit among them. "You came to us as a stranger," the elder said, his voice deep and steady. "You had no reason to stay, yet you stayed. You had no reason to fight, yet you fought. Last night you showed not only courage but also loyalty. Our people will remember this." The cowboy lowered his head in respect. "I only did what was right. A man should not turn his back on those who need him." The elder nodded. "And because of that, you are no longer only a wanderer. You are part of us now." Those words struck the cowboy more deeply than he expected. Part of them. For so long he had walked alone with no home and no family. Now he had been given a place among a people who had every reason to doubt him, but had chosen to accept him instead. It was more than he had ever hoped for. Over the next few weeks, the camp slowly healed. The children's laughter returned, filling the air with hope. The warriors trained harder, using the skills the cowboy had taught them. The women found new ways to stretch their food, gathering plants and grinding roots to make meals last longer. The tribe was not safe yet, but they were stronger, and with strength came dignity. The cowboy worked alongside them every day. He helped repair huts, carried water, and hunted for food. He no longer felt like a guest. He was simply another pair of hands doing what needed to be done. The young warrior Kiona, who had once distrusted him, began to speak with him more often. Their words were not always soft, but there was respect in them. One evening, Kiona even admitted, "When my brother was killed, I thought no outsider could ever stand with us. You proved me wrong." The cowboy simply nodded. He knew those words were not easy for Kiona to say. Through it all, the Apache woman who had first pleaded with him remained close. She carried herself with strength, but also with kindness. She reminded the people to stay hopeful, and she reminded the cowboy of the promise she had once made. But over time, he began to understand that her promise was not about herself alone. It was about ensuring that her tribe lived on, that her people's bloodline remained strong, that the children would grow up with courage instead of fear. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the desert in gold, the cowboy and the woman walked together outside the camp. The land was quiet, broken only by the soft cry of an eagle high above. She turned to him and said, "When I first saw you, I was desperate. I thought you might turn away like so many others, but you stayed, and because you stayed, my people live." He looked at her, searching for the right words. "I didn't know what I was searching for when I came here. Maybe I was searching for this without even knowing it." She smiled faintly. "Sometimes the land gives us what we need, not what we ask for." In that quiet moment, The cowboy realized that his wandering days were truly over. He no longer needed to move from place to place, searching for meaning. He had found it here, in the laughter of the children, in the strength of the warriors, in the wisdom of the elders, and in the eyes of the woman who had changed his path forever. As weeks turned into months, the cowboy became woven into the life of the tribe. He was no longer an outsider teaching them tricks of survival. He had become a brother, a protector, and a friend. The children ran to him when he returned from hunts. The elders sought his voice when they spoke of decisions. The warriors trained with him as an equal. He had given them his loyalty, and they had given him their trust. The threats did not disappear. From time to time, scouts brought news of soldiers moving near, or settlers building closer to their land, but the tribe no longer trembled at such news. They had survived once, and they knew they could survive again. The cowboy stood with them in every meeting, promising silently that he would not abandon them, no matter what came. One night, as a fire burned bright and songs filled the air, the cowboy sat quietly and looked around the circle. He saw joy on faces that had once been filled only with fear. He saw children dancing, their shadows flickering in the firelight. He saw warriors laughing, proud of their strength. He saw elders smiling softly, their hearts lighter than before. And he saw the Apache woman, her eyes glowing with peace. The cowboy felt something stirred deep in his chest. This was what it meant to belong. Not to own land, not to hold power, but to be part of a people who stood together through hardship. The elder raised his hand and spoke to the camp. "We give thanks to the spirits for life, for courage, and for those who came to us when we thought all was lost. Our tribe stands today because we stood as one, and we honor the man who chose to stand with us, though he had no reason but his heart." The people turned to the cowboy. Their voices rose together in a chant of respect, a chant that echoed through the desert night. The cowboy felt his eyes burn with emotion. He had never asked for honor, but he had been given it. When the chanting ended, the Apache woman leaned close to him and whispered, "Now you are part of our story, and our story will live on." The cowboy closed his eyes for a moment, letting the warmth of the fire and the voices of the people sink into his soul. He knew the road ahead would not be easy. There would always be struggles, but he also knew he would never again face them alone. The lonely rider who had once wandered with no purpose had found his place at last. And as the stars stretched endlessly above, he felt certain that his life, once empty and drifting, now carried meaning that would outlive him.